argument. We're going to do the 45 minutes. So it'll be like drinking out of a fire hydrant, but you'll get some water. So first off, I want to start with, I don't know, in grammar school that people used to say, put on your thinking cap or your imagination cap. So I want you to get your imagination ready. And do you have a happy place that you go to in your mind? If you could live anywhere, it might probably be here. You might enjoy living in Tuscany, and your window overlooks, a beautiful area. It may be up in the mountains with trees, surrounded by maybe a lake, some snow up there. Of course, there's the beach right outside our windows over here. Whatever it is, whether it's the beach or the mountains, doesn't matter. I want you to close your eyes for a moment. Okay. And I want you to go to that place. And I'm not going to do anything funny with you. Just close your eyes and then go to that place. And then I want you to pretend that you're looking out that window and you're seeing mountains or you're seeing ocean. You might be seeing a beautiful landscape in front of you. And actually you're washing dishes. And you don't care about washing dishes because you got this beautiful view. And I want to see your hands moving like you're washing some dishes. Go ahead, it's okay, get the body in there. You're washing some dishes, but you don't care, you're smiling. I want to see smiling faces. You're smiling, you're enjoying life. Doesn't matter that you're washing dishes. And then suddenly, from behind you, you hear a door creak open, and your son or daughter walks in. You're washing dishes, you're just happy. And he or she says this to you: "Mom, Dad, can I play with this?" What do you say? What is it? Or they come to you and say, "Can I eat this?" Sure. So it's the lizard from outside, Cooper.
Yeah, let's say that.
Yeah, all right. What if they come in and they say, "Come on, you're washing dishes. You're looking at you're in your happy spot," and they say, "Can I kill this?" What would you say? Okay, open your eyes.
As long as it's not your sister.
Right. If it's the lizard from outside, yes or no? Yeah. No, you're shaking your head. Why no?
She's a lizard person.
Because you love lizards. Okay. So mostly yes, a few no's. What if it's a spider?
Yes.
That was really quick.
It's not poisonous.
It's like, yeah. No, if it's not poisonous, right? Okay. What about the screeching next door neighbor cat?
Oh yeah, definitely kill that.
So we got no,
No, don't
absolutely.
even incinerate that thing.
no. A little bit of a disagreement here. Okay. Cooper already said it, kind of leading up to it. What if they're holding their baby brother or sister? No. Did I hear yes?
Who said yes?
No, you would say no, and we're calling the family psychologist right now to go talk to them, right?
That would be you.
That would be, I've done that before. You guys were right on it, and I really appreciate that. The key question is, can I play with this? Well, you got to answer. Well, you ask a question. What is it? If it's a lizard, maybe I'll go ahead and play with it. You might get a little nip, but if it's the rattlesnake from the field, no, right? Can I eat this? Well, licorice, sure. The lizard, maybe. If it's rat poison from the garage, absolutely not, right? Then can I kill this? Becomes a very weighty question, right? But you have to ask, what is it? You have to ask, what is it? And I want to suggest to you that this is the most single-focused question in the abortion debate. What is it? If we answer that question well, it really sets us up very nicely, ethically, morally, to answer people who have questions about it. It's actually fairly simple and straightforward. So what I want to share with you today are some ethical concerns about abortion and the value of human life, especially today in the climate that we're in. Now, I'm going to stand by over here. This is just an online dictionary definition of abortion. And Zach, would you mind reading for us that first part there?
I'll
number one?
Called voluntary abortion, the removal of an embryo or fetus from the uterus in order to end the pregnancy.
Okay. Number two?
Any of various surgical methods for terminating a pregnancy, especially during the first 6 months.
Okay. Number three?
Also called spontaneous abortion or miscarriage.
Okay. I want you to notice something. Does anything jump out at you about the definition number one? Voluntary. So you might notice the difference between voluntary and spontaneous there. That's something you might notice. Anything else?
Embryo and fetus,
Embryo and fetus. Why does that jump out at you?
because they're not acknowledging it as a person,
Yeah.
as a baby.
So a couple things. You pointed out one of them. Notice the word removal. If I said I'm going to remove Zach from the room, what would you think? Yeah, you wouldn't think I'm going to kill him. Right? But it's interesting. The language here is interesting. Removal. If I say, let's remove ourselves from the room. Okay, that means we're going to leave the room. But if I looked at him and said, I'm going to remove you from the room, a little more intensity. But you wouldn't think I might beat him up, but I'm not going to kill him. What is it? What are we removing is a key term, right? Do you know what embryo and fetus, what the roots are for that? And I'm not trying to, you guys know me by now, I'm not trying to, trick you here. Just those are just Latin terms for stages of development. But what has happened in the debate over time is those words have been sort of massaged in a direction that they just stand as ambiguous terms. Now, if I would have said, well, that's a child over there, what would you be thinking?
It's a child.
But what is a child? What properties do they have?
Life.
Well, life, yeah.
Small,
They're going to be small, younger.
not as experienced.
Yeah. If I would have said a teenager's over there, you would expect something a little bit different, right? Those are different stages of one life, right? Same with embryo and fetus. Technically, those are just Latin terms for stages of life, but today they're used as placeholders for an ambiguous thing. Does that make sense to you? Okay. So someone says, well, it's just a fetus. But what if I said, well, it's just a child? That would be very, very different, right? So we have to be careful on how we look at words. Notice, voluntary abortion, the removal of an embryo or fetus from the uterus in order to what? End. The class is about to end. Okay, good. We get to go have lunch, that's great. If I would have said, I'm going to end you, very different connotation. I wonder how people read this definition and read end. Right? Now, I'm a philosopher, so I look at these kinds of things, and they jump out at me. But probably for most people, these are just general terms, kind of empty terms, placeholders. And when you look at something like end, you don't think kill, right? It's a bit more ambiguous. There's I don't know if you want to say a lightness to it, but it just doesn't tell us really what it is and what we're ending, what we're removing. And that's just the technical definition, right? Even in the technical definition, you have a distancing from what is it. Very, very interesting. Why talk about this issue? Let me give you 4 quick reasons. Number one, this issue is a great issue to kind of start with because it really sets you up well to think about ethics. You do well on this issue, you can sort of work your way through a number of other issues. This is why I like to use this issue when I teach practical ethics. It goes to the core of who we are as human beings. It raises some core questions if we know what they are. Number one, what is the unborn entity? Now there I'm using neutral language, so I don't beg any questions on what is it yet. Okay, so I'm just saying, what is the unborn entity? That's an important question to ask. What makes a human being valuable? If the unborn entity that arises from a human sperm and a human embryo, we get another human entity. And if that is a human being, well, what makes human beings valuable? What are the properties, the characteristics that make human beings valuable? Is it some capacity that we have? Is it something intrinsic? Is it some sort of function that we have? This will be a key issue in the debate. What are our duties to human beings? What kinds of responsibilities do we have? Paige, your birthday today, wonderful thing. People celebrate you, maybe parents call you, or people might call you and stuff like that, where they celebrate you. Your parents have duties towards you, right? You don't have any kids yet at this time, so you don't have the duty to feed your kids. Fair enough? So that duty is not present for your life. But once you have kids, it'll be your duty, your responsibility to feed those kids. Is it your duty to feed the neighborhood kids? Well, it may not be your duty, but you could be a virtuous person if you do that, and you take care of them if they're not being taken care of, right? So there are things like duties that are your responsibility, but you can also have virtues that go beyond one's duty, right? So what duties do we have to human beings? Jesus talks about going the extra mile. Sometimes with our virtues, we go beyond our duties. We help people. We could ask a question such as this: what should a virtuous person do in a particular situation, like a crisis pregnancy? A lot of times we talk about rights today. What's my right in this particular situation? But what if you switch that question and say, what would a virtuous mother do in this situation? That really changes the texture, the flavor of what's going on in that particular case. Also, this issue is just not core to who we are. It also is very, very current, obviously. Now, you guys should know this. Back in June, what happened? Yeah, there was an overturn of Roe v. Wade in the Dobbs case. Can anyone describe what the legal result was for that? Yeah.
They gave the power for the states to choose what the laws are going to be in that state.
Yes. So very good, well articulated.
Didn't they already have that power?
To a certain degree, based off of different other Supreme Court decisions. And so what happened is some states had laws on the books, and they left them there about prohibiting abortion, but they were null and void due to the Supreme Court decision back in 1973, Roe versus Wade. It was also impacted with the Casey decision back in 1992, which allowed an extension of abortion through all 9 months. Then some states started putting more restrictions on abortion and would limit it to up to so many weeks. And what happened, that was challenged and went all the way up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court looked at the justification for Roe, and they found, and both pro-life and pro-abortion philosophers have known this for years, that the reasoning in Roe v. Wade just does not support a full-blown right to abortion. So what they said was, we're going to allow this to be a federalist type of issue. What that means is, and most people don't understand this, the idea is that, yes, there are federal rules and laws, but a lot of times we let states experiment, essentially. They can choose to have different laws. In Oregon or in California, there's certain, you can, if you have terminal cancer, there are some cases where you can end your life, right? There's euthanasia, active euthanasia. But other states have outlawed that, right? So now the abortion issue gets moved to the states. Sometimes you hear people say the federal government is taking away the right to abortion. That's not technically correct. They just moved it, as you correctly said, to the states. So each state can decide what they want to do. So California, where I'm from, has become a very, very pro-abortion state, all the way up to 9 months in the pregnancy, right? So you can go it used to be in the phone book, but you can go online now, and you can see clinics that will do what are called late-term abortions.
Sounds like it's kind of a pop-up for the government.
No, that's actually the way the United States was set up originally, that the federal government would have jurisdiction over certain things like the Army, certain infrastructure and things like that. But it would dispense power to the states to allow them to make laws that fit their particular context. Okay? It was called a federalist system. So technically we're not a democracy, we are a republic in that particular case. So it allows the different states to sort of experiment on what is the best way to promote justice, given their particular context. Because geography, there's all sorts of things that play into our decisions on how we make laws, all right? So this case is very, very current. We know about this. Now, what's interesting is that the law really does inform and move us in a certain direction. Since the Casey case, the data collected by the Pro-Abortion Access Society of Family Planning suggests that relative to a baseline monthly estimate from April of 2022, the overall number of legal abortions performed in the United States declined by over 10,000 in the 2 months after Roe v. Wade was overturned. So we have a decrease of anywhere now from between about 6 to 10%. So if the pro-life position is right, you have close to 11,000 unborn human persons are saved, right? Just as a quick side note, we think of the Supreme Court as the highest court in the land. Do you know it actually isn't? No, there's a basketball court right above the Supreme Court. And that's technically the highest court in the land. It's a true story. There really is a basketball court above the chambers that you can actually play. No, you're not allowed. You're not allowed to be up there while the court is in session. Yeah. Number three, I think we need to talk about this issue because it just permeates our culture, and there are a number of reasons for that. But it really also permeates our media and arts as well. You go back to a movie like Dirty Dancing, a side plot of it has to do with abortion, particularly prior to 1973 in the Roe v. Wade case. And it really tugs on your emotions if you've seen the movie. You go to the movie, let's say, The Cider House Rules. The movie is actually about 2 abortion doctors, one young, one older. A movie like Juno, where there's a complex set of relationships going on and there's a crisis pregnancy. Furthermore, we had a recent movie called Unplanned. This is about a woman who moved up into the ranks in Planned Parenthood, running a clinic. She got to a point where she was asked by the doctor of the clinic to come in and help with a particular abortion. When she went inside, she saw what was going on and literally left the clinic immediately and never turned back. Her story was brought up in Congress, eventually written about, and then made into a movie. How many people have heard of the Gosnell case? Let me just see any hands. Okay, look around the room. Oh, one. Okay. Do you remember what it's about? Okay, that's fair. It's very, very interesting that none of you have heard about the Gosnell case. Gosnell was an abortion clinic doctor. He's considered to be the greatest mass murderer in U.S. history, yet you've never known about him. Right? Mainly because, you did? Yeah? What do you, I'm just curious what you know.
If I'm thinking of the right one.
Yeah.
That's the one where he keeps trophies in his garage.
I don't know about the trophies in the garage. You could be right, and I don't know that detail. But he participated in an abortion clinic and was charged because of how many women he ended up killing, and also post-birth babies that he euthanized and killed. It went to court, and he's now serving a lifetime in prison for mass murder. It's interesting, a recent article came up about hip-hop music, and you can trace the abortion issue and how it's viewed throughout hip-hop music and rap. And it's really, really interesting to see wrestling that this community has with this particular issue. There's a ton of songs. If you want the article, let me know, I can send it to you. But a ton of songs that are about abortion on this issue. Now, who has abortions? At 2014, abortion rates, about 1 in 4 women will have an abortion by age 45. Okay? More than half of all U.S. abortion patients in 2014, where we have really good numbers, were in their 20s. Okay? Patients aged 20 through 24 obtain 34% of all abortions, and patients 25 through 29 obtain 27%. So combined, that's over 50 percent of abortions happen between the ages of about 18 and 30. Adolescents made up 12% of abortion patients in 2014, and those aged 18 to 19 accounted for 8% of all abortions. 15 through 17-year-olds, 3%, and those younger than 15, about 0.2. Okay? You can go on to see further statistics about this, how it affects different communities, but you see that most abortions are taking place at that young adult stage. 17% of abortion patients in 2014 identified themselves as mainline Protestants. Okay? 13% as evangelical Protestants, and notice 24% as Catholic, while 38% reported no religious affiliation, and the remaining 8% reported some other affiliation. So those who are evangelical tend to have less abortions. It's very, very interesting. The Catholic Church has been staunchly pro-life as far as the leadership is concerned. However, it's very interesting that on the ground, Catholic women have a high percent of abortions. Finally, a final comment here. We want to talk about this because it goes to the core of who we are. It's current. It's common throughout our life, but I think it's also a part of our calling. Learn to do what is right, promote justice, give the oppressed reason to celebrate, take up the cause of the orphan, and defend the rights of the widow. Notice one key term, at least that jumps out for me here, and that is this: learn. Right? I don't think God expects us to just know how to deal with these issues from a vacuum. I mean, we have to engage in learning how to do it. I mean, it was fun for me to sit in and play worship today. To do independence, what they call in drumming, it's hard. It takes time to learn to do. Any sport, you got to learn how to do it. Same thing with learning ethics. You have to grow in it. You have to be intentional about it. In this, we have to ask the question, well, who gets to fit into the box of the oppressed, the orphan? Right? Who fits into that category? Does the unborn fit into that category? And we're going to see some arguments to see if we can make that case. This is 2 very interesting songs. I was up in Berkeley, and I was at a conference there, and I was having lunch, and I noticed there was a sign on my table, and it said, "This is a no-hate zone." I'm like, all right, no-hate zone. And I thought to myself, because I knew these verses, at least as Jews and Christians, you are supposed to hate something. Not people, but you are supposed to hate evil. If you really respect the Lord, you should hate evil. Like slavery. We should hate slavery, right? So we're called to defend the oppressed and then to work against evil. Now, I want to ask this question. Is it ever justified to take the life of the unborn? Okay. If you want to get into a conversation with someone, this is a very in one sense, a non-threatening way of engaging the topic, because you're merely asking a question. It's very Socrates, it's very Jesus. Jesus asked a lot of questions if you do a study, and they weren't just rhetorical questions. Is it ever justified to take the life of the unborn? I want to suggest to you that there's just 4 positions on this. The answer is never. This is one pro-life position. A second one is a qualified no, that is a pro-life position. There is a qualified yes, which is a pro-abortion position, and then always, which is another pro-abortion position. Let me unpack these questions.
What does qualified no mean?
Yeah, I'll explain that right now. So there are people in the pro-life movement who argue that it's never permissible to have an abortion or to remove and kill the unborn. But this is a very, very minority position, okay? But please notice when you read articles, especially in the newspaper or you're reading online or whatever, when people attack the pro-life position or characterize it as being extreme, this is the position that they're talking about, okay? Most ethicists or Christian ethicists, pro-life philosophers, and the majority of pro-lifers fit into number 2, a qualified no. Now, why would it be a qualified no? That means that there are a few or a couple of cases where removing the unborn is justified, right? Does anyone know what those might be? Cooper, you're kind of shaking your head, maybe you know.
Endangerment to the woman.
Yeah. What like, do you have an example or?
Yeah, so like if there's complications in the pregnancy where it's going to be very, like it could kill the woman.
Yeah, it was going to die.
Justification.
Yeah, same. Yeah. So there's something called a ectopic or tubal pregnancy when the embryo gets lodged in the fallopian tubes, and if it's allowed to grow there, not only will the human embryo die, but eventually the mother will die too. Okay. And so there's a principle in ethics called double effect, and what you want to do is if you could save 2 lives, you would save both lives. That's the intention. But we can't save both lives with our technology right now or our skill. So we save one, and in this case, it would be the mother's life. So both are going to die if we do nothing, but we can remove the embryo from the fallopian tubes, and we can save the mother's life.
Why can't you remove it and leave it?
Right now, we don't have external wombs to grow the human fetus at this time.
External.
Wombs.
No, okay. I was wondering why it would be removed and left, and that would it do it again?
I'm not sure.
Like,
The embryo?
yeah, I don't know what the tubes are.
Inside the woman's body, right? After you have the insemination of sperm and egg, it has to travel into the uterus in order for it to lodge to the uterine wall in order to grow. And of course, that's when you know, and you see the woman's body growing as being pregnant, right? But on that sort of journey, if it gets caught in the fallopian tubes and lodges, it can't grow to maturity.
So there's no way to help it.
There's no way to help it.
Got it.
Yeah, it's going to die, right? Is there another case that might be justified? Any ideas? Yeah.
Some people would say rape.
Yes, there are some, even in this category, that would say in cases of rape and incest, it may be justified to allow for abortions in this case. Most of the time they would say it would have to be very, very early on. Do you know the percentage of cases in abortion? You know, it's under like 0.5%, under 1%. There's very few cases, though they're horrific, of rape and incest where the woman gets pregnant in that case. But some pro-lifers are willing to compromise on that. So that could be another case. So that's 2. Any others?
Possibly maybe like the child is like not going to be healthy enough to, like, you have to have a lot of care for the child. Like, you know, some people, like, some babies have like a lot of medical attention, and then if you don't give them that medical attention, they pass away.
Yes, most pro-lifers in this position with the qualified no still would say that even whether it's deformed, whether there's a brain damage, encephalitis, whatever it is, that unborn baby still deserves life. That it's not, in those cases, it's not justified to take a human life just because it is deformed or won't live a long life.
Yeah, I'm not saying that that's right.
No. Yeah, no, I totally get that. But someone might say that. And I would say most pro-lifers don't hold that. But position 3 holds that.
Oh.
Okay? Where you have a qualified or yes in this case. So the big difference between 2 and 3 is that the qualified no answer to this question, there's like maybe 2 or 3, 4 maybe cases where you are justified in killing the unborn life or removing it and then letting it die. Yeah.
What are the other cases?
Yeah, the other case would be this. We have cases where the mother contracts cancer during the pregnancy or has cancer and then gets pregnant. And she has to keep going through chemotherapy in order to survive. But the problem is, if she remains under the chemo treatment, it will kill the baby, right? So and this is a hard case, but is it justified for her to still go through with the chemotherapy in order to save her life? And I would fit into this camp. I think the mother it's permissible for her to continue the chemotherapy even though the baby will die, right? Now, in cases where you do have pro-life women who have cancer, they get pregnant, many of them decide to withdraw treatment and then still permit the baby to live, right? That happens in a number of cases. Is that clear? Okay. But I don't think she has a duty to stop her chemotherapy at that point, right? And some people I think can disagree about that, but that would be another case. Okay. So the main difference here is you have maybe 2, 3 instances where you would say yes, it's justified. With a qualified yes, you open that funnel quite a bit more. There might be 8, 10, 12 different reasons. Some of those, they usually fall in kind of 2 categories. They kind of are appeal to pity. They might appeal to financial issues. Too heavy of a burden on psychological burden on the woman. There's just a number of different reasons that you have in this particular case. To round this out, there is a fairly large number of people who are pro-abortion, and they think you are always justified all the way up to pregnancy. But as I mentioned...
All the way up to birth?
Birth. I'm sorry, I said it wrong. All the way up to birth. As I mentioned yesterday, there's now a movement to have what they call after-birth abortion. And so it would be having an afterbirth abortion means killing the child anywhere from birth all the way up to 16 months or so. Article by Giubellini and Minerva, 2 Italian philosophers, argue for afterbirth abortion. And in their article, what they argue is that all of the pro-abortion arguments that we generally accept in our culture justify afterbirth abortion. So this is where it's moving next. Right now, I don't know of a politician or that who's willing to go that far, but it's happening in other areas. So I'm just saying, be on the lookout for that, yeah.
How could you even call that abortion at that point?
Yeah, it's kind of like a euphemism. It really is infanticide, is what it is. The killing of a newborn baby, yeah. So notice also, again, like I showed with the dictionary definition, notice how that language changed, the language that they're using. Because many people are now comfortable with the term being pro-abortion or pro-choice, whatever term you might use. So they're comfortable with that and the reasons for it. And what Giubellini and Minerva say is that these arguments here also apply easily to afterbirth. And I can show you some of their arguments if we have time to go there, yeah.
So, have you heard of any cases like where the afterbirth abortion is like done? And like, what would be the cause of that? Like, why would someone do that?
Well, you have cases now, and that's why you'll see certain laws in states. So if you have a mother give birth prematurely, right now we can save the baby at around 24 weeks. I think we have one or two cases at 22 weeks. That's pretty early in the pregnancy process. But what has happened is that some hospitals, between that 24-week and that final 9-month period, when babies are born, sometimes nurses and doctors have just let them die because it's an unwanted pregnancy. Okay, so certain laws you see in states are trying to be put through. I think you have one in Oklahoma and a few other places where if a baby is born, there's a law that says you can't just allow it to die. You have to do what you can to save it. In other parts of the world, you see this, it's very different. Let's take, for instance, in Iceland, for all intents and purposes, they have simply removed any Down syndrome kids. But then you ask, well, how did they get rid of Down syndrome? Is they do prenatal testing, and there's a fair amount of societal pressure that if you have a Down syndrome baby, you move to abort it. So you essentially have no Down syndrome kids because everyone's aborting the kids. Now it's interesting that Iceland almost uses that as a, like we have no Down syndrome, but the way they're doing it is by anytime they find out they have a Down syndrome unborn baby, they have it aborted.
That's where technology can get really evil really fast.
So you see the various spectrum here, right? Any questions on that so far? What's going on the face there? Does it feel weighty or? Yeah. It's disturbing. It's disturbing. What's wild for me is in the context that I teach, I have both Christians and non-Christians, and it's interesting to see how many, the mixture of how comfortable people are with 3 and 4. And you want to talk disturbing, I've been using the Giubilini Minerva case for about 10 years, and I've watched the shift in the psychology of students over the 10 years. So now they're comfortable with afterbirth abortion or infanticide, which is really, really, so I'll be correcting papers and I'm like, what? And so it's disturbing for me as an ethicist to see the shift in psychology. And that's why I think it's so important to bring it up here, because you guys are right in the thick of it of people who are facing these issues. Yeah.
Can't the test for the genetics for Down syndrome appear even if it's like a false positive? You know what I'm saying? Like, can't there be tests?
They're not 100% correct.
Yeah, I've heard of a lot of people having their unborn babies tested, and they come out, like the test comes out saying they have Down syndrome,
Right.
and they're born and they don't.
Right, yeah. So there are cases where this happens. A number of pro-life women and couples are choosing sometimes not to have those tests because they're like, we're committed to raising this kid no matter what context it is, So you have, real quick, you have maybe like 10% here, 10% here, but you have the overwhelming majority in these two positions. And what has happened over the last 50 years is people kind of go back, they shift back and forth between these two positions, okay? So this is what we call the squishy middle, is that most people fall here and they move back and forth throughout their lifetime, okay? I'm going to skip something here. Is this a complex issue? I want to give you a distinction that I find very helpful as an ethicist. Something can be very psychologically complex, but not morally complex, okay? Now you think about it, almost all moral issues are that way. I mean, just think about diet, right? There's the cake. I want the cake. I'm going to eat the cake. I shouldn't eat the cake. I ate the cake, right? I know I shouldn't be eating the whole cake. It's a very simple issue for me. But psychologically, I'm stressed, having a hard time at work, whatever. Psychologically, it's difficult. Every moral issue is like that. And I think the abortion issue is like that as well. It's very psychologically and emotionally weighty in a lot of ways. We should just recognize that. However, that doesn't mean it's morally complex. Okay? And I'm going to try to show that it's like that. Now, is there a right to choose?
Depends on what position you take.
Well, I mean, if you
As
just,
a Christian,
yeah.
I feel like it would have to be very like a very certain situation where there's a right to choose.
Choose. Yeah.
I feel like there's always a right to choose because of our free will, but it's the choice of right or wrong. Are you going to choose the right, which is good, or wrong, which is evil? And you have that in everyday life.
Right. It's just like the very first question when we started. Can I play with this? Can I eat this? Can I kill this? Well, you have to fill in the blank, don't you? So, is there a right to choose? Well, you kind of got to fill in the blank, don't you? Do you have a right to choose your own spouse? Yeah, for the most part. There's a few places that still practice arranged marriages, but you know, do you have a right to choose which car you drive? Generally, yeah. There's lots of things you have the right to choose, depending on how you fill in that blank. I once saw a car. It said, "I am pro-choice America," and on the other side, it said, "Boycott veal." And I tried to wait outside the car to talk to them, and I go, "Do you see a contradiction here?" They didn't come out, so I couldn't talk to them. But, okay, you're pro-choice here, but you're not pro-choice there, right? So people don't even recognize in their bumper stickers that they're inconsistent. So I want to suggest that being pro-choice, is there a right to choose? That's not a complete right. It's an incomplete right. You have to fill in the blank on what you're choosing. Greg Kokel puts it this way. I like the way he sums it up. He says, if the unborn is not a human person, no justification for abortion is necessary, right? I tell my pro-abortion friends, I say, if you can show me that the unborn human entity or the unborn entity is not a human person, okay, well then, you know, if it is a clump of cells, then do what you want, kind of a thing. However, if the unborn is a human person, no justification for abortion is adequate. And I put the asterisk there is because he fits in the number 2 position. He recognizes it's a qualified no in that particular case. So he sums it up very, very nicely. Is there a right to choose? I think that's an incomplete right, and we should point this out to people. You have to fill in the blank of what you're choosing. What is it, right, in this case? Can or should I choose X? Well, let's fill in the blank. Can I choose to kill the unborn entity? Well, tell me what it is, and we'll discuss it. Let me give you a pro-life argument. I'll give it in just a couple of steps. If you want to take a picture of it, that's fine. But this is a sound argument. It's pretty straightforward. Premise 1, the unborn entity, from the moment of conception, is a full-fledged member of the human community. We know this scientifically, for sure. It is a prima facie just means on the surface. It is morally wrong to kill any member of the human community. Every successful abortion kills an unborn entity, a full-fledged member of the human community. Therefore, every successful abortion is prima facie morally wrong. Why prima facie there? What he's saying is, on the surface, unless you have a really good reason. And the qualified no gave you 2 or 3 potential reasons. The qualified yes wants to really expand that set of justification. Okay, does that make sense to you? Okay. So this is a pretty straightforward argument. What I say to my pro-abortion friends is simply that I go, well, we know it's a human being from conception on. What justification do you have for killing a human being? What do you think? What might their response be? What do you think?
It's not really a human Maybe until it has a mind or has.
right? So it's not really a human being. Now, science actually doesn't tell us that. We know it's actually a human being. So it's really, right now, it's really hard to deny on scientific grounds what it is. And so what is happening, now please listen to this, what is happening now is there's a separation of human and person. And pro-abortion philosophers want to separate those two and say, they admit it's a human, but it's not a person yet. And what we should be for, they argue, is it's not so much human rights, but person rights is what's important.
They're like synonyms.
They're not synonyms, technically, right? Because angels could be persons, but not humans, right? So you can make that distinction. But what I would say is, we know of no human that's not a person. In other words, these are human persons with great potential, not potential human persons. These are human persons with great potential, not potential human persons. See the distinction there?
One more time?
This is a human person with great potential, not a potential human person. I want to partly close with this. One of the big challenges, and then any questions that you want to ask. Some of the main challenges, as you pointed out, are, well, it's just a clump of cells, or it's not really a human person, or it's not alive yet, or something like this, right? How many, you said you're a nurse? Or you're studying to be, you guys?
Lauren's a nurse, I'm an MA, so just right below it.
Okay. Have you guys heard of embryoscopy? Yeah. Have you seen the footage of embryoscopy for human development? Okay. I always ask, I get a lot of nurses coming through my program, and I just like to see who's seen it and who hasn't. What you guys can see here, most people never ever see. And let me see if I can play it. Should work. If not, I'm gonna switch. Give me a second. So I'm gonna show you. This comes from the Endowment of Human Development, and this is not a sonogram or an ultrasound. What this is live fiber optic camera footage of the human embryo. What'd I do? Sorry about that. Thanks, man.
Your TV.
I love the technical help so quick, Cooper.
Just watching it grow.
From conception on.
Welcome to the amazing world inside the womb where every tiny baby grows and prepares for life.
So
after
that's
birth.
live footage.
It's also the place where bonding between mother and child begins.
Sorry.
And where each little one's lifelong health is partly established. Human development begins at fertilization when a male and a female reproductive cell join to form a unique single-cell embryo. At about 24 hours, the single-cell embryo divides into 2 cells, then 4 cells, and so on. This begins the incredible transformation from single-cell embryo to precious newborn. Surprised to know that most body parts form and begin to function in the first 8 weeks, even though full-term pregnancy lasts 38 weeks. By 22 days, the heart begins to beat and quickly resembles the heart of a newborn. By 4 weeks, the baby is
So there's the
surrounded
live
by a
embryoscopy.
fluid-filled sac, and her heart is pumping nutrients to her entire body. Here you can see her beating heart in slow motion, just 4.5 weeks after fertilization. Do you see how her heart changes color as blood enters and leaves its chambers with each beat? By 6 weeks, the baby begins to move, and he will turn away if lightly touched on his face. Brainwaves have been recorded as early as 6 weeks and 2 days.
Most women don't know they're pregnant at this point.
By 7 weeks, the baby begins turning her head and moving her hands. Individual fingers are emerging from his hand plates, and his eyes are developing rapidly. Leg movements are also seen, along with the startle response. The baby's 4-chambered heart is now nearly complete and continues its life-sustaining activity, resting only briefly between each heartbeat. By 7.5 weeks, the baby's fingers are separate. His hands begin to touch in the midline, as do his feet. Here you can see her beautiful right eye, surrounded by her brand new eyelids. Between 7 and 8 weeks, the baby forms nearly 2,000 additional body parts. By 8 weeks, the baby's brain is so complex that parts of it closely resemble the brain of a newborn.
It's when most women are finding out that they're actually pregnant. They missed a period.
The baby begins breathing movements even though there is no air in the womb. Even at this early age, most babies prefer to use their right or left hand, just like you do.
So we can determine right and left-handedness now within 3 months.
In just 8 weeks, the remarkable single-cell embryo has blossomed into 1 billion cells.
So this is
which
under
have
the first
already
trimester.
formed an estimated 4,000 body parts and a dozen body systems. By 9 weeks, the baby begins to suck his thumb, swallow, sigh, and stretch. His face, hands, and feet now sense and respond to light touch. Yawning begins by 9.5 weeks. By 10 weeks, he practices walking motions, and his fingerprints begin to form. By 11 weeks, the baby's mouth and lips are fully formed, and she continues to grow much larger. By 12 weeks, the baby opens.
So if you want, I know, if you want to see the video, see these videos, go to the endowmentofhumandevelopment.org, ehd.org, ehd.org. They're an independent organization that shows this type of human development. Let me leave you with this, and this is a very quick and easy way to dialogue about this issue. There seems to be, is that pretty impactful? I mean, it's just wild, you know, all that development is happening prior to even people knowing they're pregnant. When you talk to someone, simply ask them, do what's called the SLED test. See, there's only 4 differences between the born and the unborn. I'm not talking about the Born Identity movies. The born and the unborn. There are 4 differences: size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. Very quickly, does size determine your human rights? Shaq is bigger than my little kid. Shaq doesn't have more rights than the toddler. Are most of us at different stages of level of development? Absolutely. A toddler is less developed than a 2-year-old. A 2-year-old is less developed than a teenager. Just because the unborn have less development doesn't make them less human or less deserving of rights. Environment. Where you are doesn't determine what you are. If you're on Mars, or if you're on Jupiter, or if you're on Earth, you're still a human being. Just because you go into a garage doesn't make you a car. Just because your environment is a womb doesn't take away your human identity or your rights. Degree of dependency. We all have varying degrees of dependency. Yes, the unborn are more dependent. An astronaut is dependent on machines in orbit or going to outer space. Scuba divers are dependent on equipment. Your degree of dependency does not determine your human value or your human rights. I would just suggest to my pro-abortion friends in that, are there any other differences that you can see that justify the taking of a life? A lot of times today they'll say that the capacity to reason. That's a dangerous thing to start to use. And in fact, most disability organizations are staunchly pro-life just because you have different levels of, depending on the malady, of the degree of how you can reason. And we don't want to take people's rights just because they can't reason as well as the other, right?
Does that fall into level of development?
I think so, yeah. So be on the lookout, and this is going to continue to happen, for the separation of human and person. And certain secular philosophers are arguing for person rights, and literally there's a death of human rights going on. So you also see a rise in identifying certain animals as persons as well. So you have a movement in the animal rights on this issue as well. This is a really easy way to dialogue with people. I hope you use it. If you want the argument in the PowerPoint, I'm happy to send it to you. I'm out of time, and I apologize to our next speaker who is coming in. So blessing.